Mankind has always feared spiders. They are a frightening, alien, and unnatural-looking creature that is molded to be a near-perfect hunter. Their webs are both beautiful and deadly, their movements both elegant and unnerving, and their nature both awe-inspiring and terrifying. So it makes sense that the spider would have its own place in the world of fantasy. If a spider had the intelligence and nature of a human, what would that look like? Let's talk about it. This is Fantastical History. Now, many cultures have their own myths and legends about spiders with human-level intellect, and most have the spiders as crafty, sneaky, or wicked in nature. The Yorogumo of Japanese legend is a spider that can take the form of a woman and lure in human men to their deaths. The myth of Arachne from Greece has a woman turned into the first spider by Athena for outdoing her in a weaving contest and insulting the gods in her work. And the African myth of Anansi tells of a spider who was both clever and crafty, but had a streak of mischievous malice to him as well. Spiders in reality are very similar. They are clever and crafty creatures who have developed genius methods of catching prey and staying alive. But they're also dangerous and frightening to behold. In D&D and some anime tales, there are actually a race of spider creatures called Drider or Arachne, which are meant to represent this dual nature. Drider are like centaurs, where they are human from the waist up, but have spider abdomens and legs below that. From there, traits can vary. Drider might have venom, multiple eyes, skills with weaving and silkwork, carnivorous tendencies, and perhaps even an affinity for bondage. But there are traits that tend to have in common between the Drider. Drider tend to be more solitary in nature, not living with others of their own kind, which fits as spiders are also usually solitary creatures themselves, having no issues with feasting on each other. This makes understanding Drider culture and livability more difficult, as we can't discuss their society and larger culture. Instead, Drider would likely behave in a more primal sense, being more dangerous to humanity, as humanity would likely at worst be seen as food, and at best be seen as a nuisance. Their bodies would appear frighteningly different from humanity, so frankly, even if they had more benevolent dispositions, it would be very difficult for humans to view them as beneficial or friendly. Discrimination would likely turn Drider and spider-like people against humanity and spirit more easily.
Just so you know, I have no interest in feeding on your sympathy. I'm just fed up with you humans. Your kind may act like you want to help, but in the end you can only accept people who are like you. It makes me sick.
If we're being honest, most Drider would probably be killed or hunted into oblivion during the Neolithic period. The more dangerous Drider breeds would be destroyed first and foremost for mankind's own protection. Were they not, it's more than likely the Drider would fight back, see us as food or enemies, and work to eradicate or hide from us. In the worst case scenario, Drider would be exterminated as dangerous monsters to be feared. And since they have no cultural or societal unity to stand against us, they would be hunted down like animals. It is the nature of man to fear what they find monstrous and to destroy it if they can. It's sad but true. However, it doesn't have to be this way. What if I told you that Drider could actually maybe reshape the world as we know it? There's one commodity that Drider can give in bulk that humanity would find invaluable. You see, when talking about ancient cultures, races, or creatures, the thing that we always have to look at is what can they provide in terms of trade or commodity. In fact, during the ancient days and ancient dynasties of the Eastern and Western world, the commodity a Drider could produce was so prized that it helped China rise to control the known world economy. Silk. Because of their control and curb on the silkworm and the silk it produced, the legendary Silk Road was formed, in which the Chinese used to trade their silk and other spices and commodities with the West, ensuring that the Chinese were making bank off of the West and Near East and their desire for silk goods. There are Roman senatorial records of complaints about revealing inexpensive silk women's clothing. Silk was essential to the West, and the Chinese had the silkworms to make it in bulk. But again, that's because of the silkworm. What if Drider were real? And if these spider people could produce silk en masse and its fine quality, then we have to assume that they have the capability to curb the market themselves. And as spiders likely prefer to live in dark, moist climates where they can live isolated and alone, then a very good location for most Drider to live in the West particularly, would be the dark forests of Germany. If Germany has a very large population of Drider in its forests, you can believe the Roman Empire would want their services. By keeping Drider on the payroll, the Romans no longer have to live off of Chinese silk, which they can make themselves. This would greatly impact China's growth and economic power as the centuries progress. Oh, sure, they'd still be powerful and mostly independent, but not nearly as much as they could be, and not nearly as influential. The Drider, who likely are very antisocial, shy, and persecuted for most of their early existence, would likely not be interested in wealth, but rather security, something Rome could provide. If the Roman Empire could provide protection and safety for Drider, then it stands to reason that Drider would flourish under Roman rule, thus allowing Rome quick and easy access to high-quality silk product in bulk by their own Drider. And certainly, the East may have their own Drider population, but as they aren't exclusive to the East, they can't use them as a leverage point against the West. As the dynasties change and powers shift, the necessity of Drider would not go away. Mankind would become used to their presence, and Drider in turn would grow used to the protection of humanity. Drider might even become closer to humanity, depending on them for food and shelter, not being militaristic or aggressive, trusting humanity to defend them in wartime. Now, this isn't to say Drider couldn't fight in wars. Their abilities to set traps using their silk, use poisons, and intimidate their enemies would be excellent in battle, but just as you wouldn't put your best blacksmiths or artisans on the front line, why would you put your greatest weavers and silk producers? They are vital to your economy, and their ability to produce goods is invaluable. Unless the Drider specifically wishes to fight, I doubt they'd be drafted. This would not fully change Drider nature. They would likely still be mostly solitary and wary of strangers and humans that they don't know, and Drider likely wouldn't form large social groups, but they would come to see humanity as beneficial, so long as they aren't treated as slave labor. It would actually be much harder to make Drider into slave labor. Making human slaves isn't as difficult, because if a human slave dies or is incapable of working due to abuse or stress, then it's easy to go out and find more human slaves. But Drider are solitary and rare, not as easily replaceable. They must be cared for and treated well if they are to produce large amounts of silk. If they're uncared for or abused or mistreated, a Drider might not be as useful anymore. This would likely carry on into even the 19th century, and even in the United States, you'd see Drider appear there. As a matter of fact, you would likely see more Drider, more commonly, in the southern United States, as their silk would be more valued there for its breathability and lightness in hotter and humid conditions. So yes, let that sink in. A southern Drider. What have we done? Today, silk is vastly more expensive as a fabric to make clothing from because of the difficult process that goes into making it. But with Drider at work, that could all change. The world of fashion, clothing, and perhaps even home design could change because of what Drider are capable of. It's hard to believe, but in the best case scenario for them, Drider might stand an excellent chance of making it to the modern day if left to their own devices and allowed the opportunity to work with humans for their own protection and their own prosperity. You might think it hard to believe, but remember that humanity in its ancient history found unlikely ways to create dye, makeup, and other commodities. After all, silk literally comes from a worm. Is it really so hard to imagine we'd prefer it from a spider who can smile at us as they do it? Just a thought. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.